We'll begin with the situation in New South Wales. We continue to see these low but persistent cases. What's your main takeout from that state's update today?
Well, not out of the woods still. I think I've said previously that they haven't squashed it, and they haven't quite squashed it. They've done a good job with their contact tracing and testing, but I think springing up in the western suburbs is always going to be much more difficult in terms of containing it, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. So look, New South Wales needs to be on alert, and people do need to get tested because that's the really critical thing that they can do, and obviously wear their masks and maintain their physical distancing and just general hygiene, because it is still a bit of a worry because it hasn't been squashed at this moment in time. But hopefully the good work so far from the contact tracing can be maintained and they can continue to keep it at bay at the moment, but it is still somewhat on edge at the moment.
Particularly with that alert, I guess, throughout Western New South Wales. We did see that there's been no positive results come back thus far, but we haven't heard how many tests. And we do know usually with those regional areas it can take some time for tests to get back. How concerned should the regional New South Wales still be at this stage?
Oh, again, it's another worry, isn't it? That this is the issue with having had the virus seed into wider Sydney. They've done a fantastic job in that Northern Beaches area, it looks like, but it's the seeding in the rest of the city which is always going to be the concern, and that it's much harder to contain. And they're just holding it at bay at this moment in time, and hopefully it will be maintained. But the alternative would be really unfortunate. That'd be that Victorian situation where it has gone into an area where, for example, maybe there may be less understanding about what to do in terms of testing and doing the right thing as far as getting, if you have symptoms, to go get a test. Hopefully that won't be the case, but if it is, then we'll have a problem.
Chris, Victoria's new mystery case was potentially caught at the MCG Boxing Day test match. Should this serve as a warning on the eve of the third test at the SCG?
Well, it reinforces the concerns that the Australian Medical Association has had, right until now about having the crowds at the test at the Sydney Cricket Ground. It's good that the crowds have been reduced, and I understand that they will have very strong COVID-safe plans, but really the danger periods are really going to be when crowds are in the common areas, when they're getting food, when in the toilets, when they're walking through corridors. So really they're the risky areas, and so there is a concern about that remains, and the MCG situation is just a reminder of that.
Now, Australia's vaccine rollout has been brought forward by 2 weeks. There's been a lot of criticism, particularly from the federal opposition, about the timing, particularly with that lag between when the Therapeutic Goods Administration is due to approve the vaccine and then when it gets rolled out. For those that don't know, can you explain a bit about why there is this sort of lag?
Well, the first thing is we've got to make sure that the approval process is maintained. I mean, that's really the important thing, because I think that going through our normal approval process, which is different from what's happened overseas in terms of emergency approval, is really important, because I think maintaining the trust of an individual when the GP comes up to them with a vaccination, that it's gone through everything, the same sort of approval process that they've had for any other vaccination, is really important. After that, there's actually quite a lot to do this properly. I mean, you can already see that within the UK and other areas where they've really had to go in there in a sort of emergency and somewhat panicked situation, there have been sort of foul ups in terms of wastage. There's been problems with people trying to get the right number of doses out of a vial, for example, and really the logistical problems, for example, of the Pfizer vaccine, in terms of the fact that it has to be kept at -70, getting it out to areas like an aged care facility are massive. Beyond that, there are huge problems of things like making sure that we go through the normal pre-vaccination checklists and the consent process. So all these things, if we do this properly, we maintain trust, and it's a really critical aspect of the rollout, because I think the community would expect that, but they would also expect that we do this in a really professional way. And I think that is of greater value at the moment in Australia, where we don't have the emergency, than rushing into it and then making mistakes and potentially then undermining the trust in the vaccines.
Chris Moy, thanks for your time this afternoon.
It's a pleasure.